So I'd like to welcome everyone to the fall quarter 2021 session of Lamont Colloquium, where we recognize and support scholarship among Lamont students and often faculty as well. We have two presenters today, Sophie Lewis and Malia Odekirk. We'll begin with Sophie, and Sophie Lewis is a second-year master's student at University of Denver studying musicology. Originally from Scotland, she holds a first-class honors degree in music from the University of Aberdeen, where she completed her undergraduate studies. Her research interests include music education methods and how they relate to mental health, equity efforts in the music industry, and Scottish traditional music. Sophie is fortunate enough to be supported financially in her studies by the University of Denver, the Scottish International Education Trust, and the McGlashan Trust, without whom this research would not be possible. Sophie is also a cellist who thoroughly enjoys ensemble performance. Sophie will be speaking to us today on the topic of exploring the marginalization of female and non-binary voices in barbershop harmony. Please join me in welcoming Sophie Lewis. I will now mute everybody and invite Sophie to unmute herself.
Thank you so much for that introduction. And thank you everybody for joining us today. I'm just going to share my screen here. Make sure I'm sharing sound too. Okay. You'd think that after a year of doing this, I'd be more ready to do it, but here we go. All right. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today. When one thinks of the traditional barbershop quartet, one may be inclined to picture four middle-aged white men in straw hats and waistcoats. It's without question that the way the public pictures barbershop today is not truly reflective of the diverse historical or contemporary scene of barbershop. However, with this stereotype being at the forefront of the public eye, it's no surprise that people are mostly unaware of the inequalities that exist in the Barbershop Harmony Society today. In this presentation, I will explore the historical instances of marginalization within the Barbershop Harmony Society and how it has impacted the competitive environment today. I'll then analyze the Barbershop Harmony Society rulebook and outline how their own rules are contradictory to their practices, and finally argue that the current setup of the Barbershop Harmony Society is harmful and exclusionary to female and non-binary voices, and the impact that we as consumers of the art form could potentially have. I'll utilize primary sources taken from the Barbershop Harmony Society themselves, as well as examples of performing quartets. I'd like to preface this presentation with an acknowledgement that I'm a cis woman and cannot speak to the specific experiences of non-binary people within barbershop. I also acknowledge that the instances of gender discrimination are not unique to women and non-binary people and can affect several people who are gender non-conforming. My decision to focus specifically on non-binary people and women in this instance is because, as I will soon outline, the Barbershop Harmony Society is rooted in the male-female gender binary. The performance of Barbershop Harmony has been divisive since its inception, both in terms of race and gender. The Barbershop Harmony Society, as it is known today, also known as the Society for the Preservation and Encouragement of Barbershop Singing in America, was officially founded in 1938 in Tulsa by Owen Clinton Cash. The original Barbershop Harmony Society was an opportunity for gentlemen to congregate and sing in harmony, as was common to do at the time. Aside from being a male-only event, the original event was also made up of exclusively white males. It was not until 1992 when Lynn Abbott published his paper, Play That Barbershop Chord, a case for the African-American origin of barbershop harmony, that it was widely recognized that the very style of barbershop originated in the African-American tradition. While the Barbershop Harmony Society is undoubtedly built on racist foundations and still benefits from those foundations today, with the first Black person to win the Barbershop Harmony Society International Contest being in 2019, with one member of the quartet's signature being a Black man. Sexism also runs hand in hand with this. Since women were not allowed to perform with the men when the Barbershop Harmony Society was first formed in 1938, The women's only group, the Sweet Adelines, was formed in 1945 to enable female identifying singers to also enjoy barbershop performance. While the Sweet Adelines were also slow to embrace Black members, they are now committed to learning from, quote, their exclusionary past towards women of color, end quote, a commitment that the Barbershop Harmony Society has not formally made. While the initial aim of the Sweet Adelines was to create a space for women to perform like the men, this unfortunately also included the exclusion of Black members, and thus a third group was born, Harmony Incorporated. While the move to rightfully include Black members in the Barbershop Harmony Society happened in 1963 at the height of the Civil Rights Movement, it wasn't until 2018 that women were able to compete in the Barbershop Harmony Society. It's clear then that although women have had their own spaces to compete, they've not been able to compete in the flagship competition until incredibly recently. The Barbershop Harmony Society now consists of the following competitive categories: quartets, senior quartet, chorus, and collegiate quartet. These categories are contested as either all male, all female, or mixed gender groups. The Barbershop Harmony Society rulebook defines gender identity as it pertains to competitive quartets in the first page of its handbook. Gender identity for quartet classification is defined as, quote, ensembles are classified by the individual member's self-identification in the Society Member Center database, end quote. They further add in a footnote to this definition that individuals describe for themselves how they gender identify, and that description is stored as part of the member record. The Barbershop Harmony Society strives to treat all individuals equitably and with presumption of good character and integrity in accurately maintaining their own member records. While the Barbershop Harmony Society does allow people to self-identify in terms of gender and how they wish to compete, this does instantly assign gender roles to voice type. I argue today that this assignment and then separation of voice types is damaging to both the future of competition and especially the non-binary people who wish to engage with the art form, who must declare a gender to compete. I argue that the rules of barbershop competition as they stand within the Barbershop Harmony Society do not have any stipulations that warrant the segregation of voices, and if the Everyone in Harmony initiative aimed at diversifying the society is to do any real practical work to improve equality in the society, the structure of the competition must change.
If the song and arrangement as performed lacks a sensitive handling of musical elements such as melody, harmony, and embellishments indicative of the barbershop style, then the music score goes down, the music score goes down, music score goes down. If the song and arrangement as performed lacks a sensitive handling of musical elements such as melody, harmony, and embellishments indicative of the barbershop style, which can briefly be defined as a style of unaccompanied vocal music characterized by consonant four-part chords for every melody, not in a primarily homorhythmic texture.
Oh, guys, look, the music judges are salivating right now.
The barbershop style, as the newfangled word just skillfully explained, is defined as, quote, a style of unaccompanied vocal music characterized by consonant four-part chords for every melody note in a primarily homorhythmic texture, end quote. The official rulebook for Barbershop Harmony Society spends its first page defining the barbershop style. They go on to expand and explain that a typical style features a lead who consistently sings the melody, a tenor harmonizing above the lead, a bass singing the lowest notes, and a baritone who fills out the chord. Notice from the start that the official rulebook itself defines parts in the quartet by voice type, not gender. They further outline that the barbershop style is defined by, quote, singing songs with understandable lyrics and easily singable melodies, whose tones clearly define a tonal center and imply major and minor and barbershop, known as dominant and secondary dominant seventh chords, that often resolve in the circle of fifths, while also making use of other resolutions. Barbershop music also features a balanced and symmetrical form. The basic song and its harmonization are embellished by the arranger to provide appropriate support of the song's theme and to close the song effectively, end quote. They further prize a high level of vocal skill where singers can blend their voices and sing perfectly tuned chords in just intonation. They also judge the performance of the music in that the ensembles may use appropriate visual and musical methods to communicate the story of their music and provide the audience with an emotionally satisfying and entertaining experience. They require that the musical and visual delivery is from the heart, believable, and sensitive to the song and its arrangement throughout. They argue that, quote, the most stylistic performance artistically melds together the musical and visual aspects to create and sustain the illusions suggested by the music, end quote. This definition of barbershop style outlines the three judging criteria of the Barbershop Harmony Society: music, performance, and singing. Before moving on to discuss these judging criteria in more detail, I'd once again like to point out that nowhere in this definition of the barbershop style does it stipulate that a certain range of notes must be performed, nor does it stipulate that the voices must be of a certain gender, only that they blend and sing in tune, which any combination of voices could do with the right training and ensemble capabilities. Barbershop quartet competitions are judged by a panel of judges who are focused on three topics, as mentioned earlier: music, performance, and singing. While all three of these elements overlap and contribute to an overall performance experience, the judging criteria can be briefly broken down into the following: music, which consists of consonants, theme and development, embellishments, execution, and delivery; performance, where characteristics of the barbershop performance in general, visual and vocal balance, and comedic performances are assessed; and singing, where intonation, vocal quality, unity, expansion quality, and vocal expression are assessed as well. After a detailed analysis of the rule book, though, where these criteria are outlined and discussed at length, including a detailed explanation of how points are deducted from performance, there's nothing within these rules that stipulate a desired range of pitches to be covered by a particular quartet. In fact, the rules stress that, quote, the range of the parts should be such that all singers can produce good quality and good barbershop sound. What constitutes an acceptable vocal range will depend on the abilities of each performer. The voicing should not be so high or so low as to preclude the full-voiced resonant sound that is characteristic of the barbershop style, end quote. This stipulation in the rules, to me, lays to rest the arguments that women could not compete against men because they cannot sing notes as low as men. Since the range covered is encouraged to be what is comfortable to the individual quartet, this actually gives the possibility to hear new and different interpretations of pieces. Take, for example, the barbershop classic Hello My Baby, or Smile, which I have here performed by both all male quartets and then by female and mixed gender quartets, respectively.
Hello, my baby, hello, my honey, hello, my ragtime gal. Oh, send me a kiss by wire. Baby, my heart's on fire. So if you refuse me, honey, you'll lose me, then you'll be left alone. Oh, baby, telephone and tell me I'm your own. So, hello, my baby, hello, my honey, hello, my
Hello, hello there. Hello, my baby. Hello, my honey. Hello, my ragtime pal. Send me a kiss by wire. Baby, my heart's on fire. And if you refuse me, honey, you lose me. Then you'll be left alone. Oh, baby, telephone and tell me your.
And here is the arrangements of Smile.
Though your heart is aching, smile even though it's breaking. When there are clouds in the sky, you'll get by. If you smile even though it's breaking dawn. There are clouds in the sky, you'll get by. If you smile through your fear and sorrow, smile and maybe tomorrow you'll see the sun.
Even between two all-male quartets, there are several stylistic differences, which is the beauty of music.
Smile though your heart is aching. Smile even though it's breaking. When there are clouds in the sky, you'll get by. If you smile through your fear and sorrow, smile, and maybe tomorrow you'll see.
Indeed, the Barbershop Harmony Society rulebook stipulates that, quote, there is no one way to sing in general or to sing barbershop in particular, just as there is no one way to stage a song in the barbershop style. Performers are encouraged to develop their own style and identity, end quote. What the Barbershop Harmony Society emphasizes in their rulebook is that the performance must be heartfelt and communicates emotion to the audiences. So why again must all female and mixed voice quartets compete in separate categories that are not part of the flagship competition? The Barbershop Harmony Society often argue that the reason for slow change within the society is because they are trying to maintain an audience, and that changing how things are done could lose the charity money that would be detrimental to the future of the preservation of barbershop. But wouldn't it be more exciting for an audience to see different examples of how the barbershop arts can be performed? To see different blends of voices and different emotional expressions. Since this is such a big element of the judging criteria, it could be argued that the continued separation of voices in competition is not for the sake of fair competition, but to maintain a patriarchal system where men are the main event. Since women have only been able to compete in the Barbershop Harmony Society for 3 years, it could be argued that having them compete in separate competitions is to help avoid judge bias that would disadvantage their competition in the long run. As Felix Graham identifies, while blind auditions have helped gender biases in instrumental performance, this is not possible for female identifying singers. He further argues that, quote, humans are capable of making unconscious, sophisticated oral judgments and distinctions about other human voices, not least of which is determining sex based on acoustic and harmonic characteristics of an individual's voice, end quote. And that a lot of discrimination of non-males is dependent on how aware of their biases the listener is. With the voice being so personal and intrinsically linked to the personal identity of the performer, it could be within the best interest of all female and mixed quartets to remove the potential for bias until the society has had more time to change its practices and train more judges to set aside their biases. This is not to say that the separation is acceptable, but it could explain the setup in the early stages of women being able to compete. In 2018, the Barbershop Harmony Society launched their Everyone in Harmony initiative, which was designed to encourage more diverse groups to interact with the Barbershop Harmony Society and barbershop at large. It launched a number of educational and outreach workshops and resources, but to the best of my knowledge from reading the rulebook, nothing about the way that barbershop is contested changed along with this movement, except that women were now able to compete in the Barbershop Harmony Society. If the mission of the Barbershop Harmony Society is truly to bring people together in harmony and fellowship to enrich lives through singing, as they claim, then the way that competition is structured needs to change. The system as it currently exists enforces a gender binary that means that non-binary people are forced to either compete as a floating voice under a gender identity which is not true to who they are, or to not compete at all. There is no accommodation for non-binary voices when self-identifying with the society. As indicated by the screenshot from the application form to join the Barbershop Harmony Society, the only gender identities available for performers are male or female. And while they do acknowledge that this does not reflect every individual's gender identity, it's still discriminatory and exclusionary to stick so closely to these binaries, especially when voice type does not always reflect gender identity. Engagement both online and in membership increased in 2018 after the Everyone in Harmony initiative was introduced, including 700 women signing up to be members of the society. It would not be unreasonable to argue that if the Barbershop Harmony Society were to change its registration and competition structure, then it would be able to engage a new audience and thus preserve the future of barbershop. Of course, this is not as simple as just enabling male and female quartets to compete together in conferences. There needs to be training for judges to be sure that inherent biases are being challenged and safeguards put in place to ensure that vulnerable performers are being kept safe. That being said, as the older generation of barbershop fans and performers are starting to fade out, it's imperative that the Barbershop Harmony Society adapt and include voices that are currently being overlooked and give them an equal stake in the competition. As far as I can tell from current quartets, there are no non-binary singers competing in the Barbershop Harmony Society, And I think this is a direct result of the commitment to the gender binary from the Barbershop Harmony Society that puts people off being a part of an institution that does not accept them as they are, which is depriving the field of barbershop of embracing several talented voices. For an art form that prizes self-expression, it seems ironic that self-identification is an exclusionary factor which the Barbershop Harmony Society should consider reforming if it's to remain a relevant organization. Barbershop Harmony Society is an institution built on a history of exclusion and segregation. As we see a slow move towards the progressive policies, it is in the best interest of the Barbershop Harmony Society going forward to include a variety of different voices, especially those who do not fall into the traditional gender binary. Given that the official rulebook does not stipulate any reason why all voice types could not compete together, and in fact encourages musical and personal self-expression through performance, it seems that the current exclusion is indicative of the white supremacist principles of the foundation of the society. And to remain relevant and to preserve the art form, the Barbershop Harmony Society needs to move away from this exclusive gender binary. The Barbershop Harmony Society continues to hide behind the excuse of maintaining an audience as a charity that needs to maintain donors, but I believe that we have the power as the audience and indeed the future voices of the industry to influence change. If the audience expresses a desire to see change that would benefit the Barbershop Harmony Society financially, then it might motivate effective change while also enabling a whole new audience to interact with a really very fun style of music. Quartets like Halo, pictured below, are using their platform as a way to educate fans and are breaking into the industry as the first all African-American, all-female quartet. Following their lead and listening to their ideas may be beneficial for fans who aren't sure how to use their influence yet, but wish to make a difference. As a fan of Barbershop myself, I can't help but feel disappointed that this needless exclusion continues within a style that I really enjoy, but I hope that perhaps in light of the pandemic and the shift in social justice movements, that we, the audience, and the next generation of decision makers can start to make impactful change. I thank you for your time, and I can take any questions now.
Thank you very much, Sophie, for that really illuminating exploration of the gender binary in barbershop. And I would just invite anybody who has any questions or comments, indeed, to just unmute yourself and go ahead and address Sophie directly.
Hi, Sophie. I don't think we've really had much interaction, but I'm Mitch. I teach music theory. Your bibliography went by pretty quick. So there's a music theorist named Clifton Boyd who's been writing a dissertation. Are you familiar with his work by any chance?
I'm not, no.
Okay, so yeah, he's working on a dissertation on music theory and barbershop, and his contention is, it's not even a contention, just the decades of racial segregation in this organization, and how the preservation of the barbershop style is really an attempt to prevent any sonic signifiers of Black music from entering this genre. And I'm just wondering, what is there in that history that could, what is there in that history that could be mobilized to break down this other exclusivity too? Because I mean, it's a nasty history.
I definitely agree, and I think that there's a lot of I guess feigning ignorance around it within the society, which I'm very conflicted about supporting the Barbershop Harmony Society because there's so much feigned ignorance. They have actually a presentation on their website where they talk about Lynn Abbott's paper about the discovery of the barbershop chord, and they make jokes about the fact, we just thought it was something that white people did, and it's really, really horrible to sit and try and watch because it's God, this is so tone deaf. I think there really needs to be more transparency within it, and I think that will help with gender as well. In terms of the actual musical backgrounds of it, I'm not as entrenched in the actual theory behind barbershop. I'm definitely not the strongest theory student, as I'm sure my other professors will attest. But I think definitely the transparency needs to be there, and I think elevating the voices of quartets like Halo, they actually run Zoom sessions where they do workshops about how the theory relates to the spirituals back in the day as well. And there's a lot of really interesting conversations going on with Halo. I think someone did a conference paper about it back in the spring, and they did a whole analysis of Halo. So I think getting involved and elevating voices like these wonderful ladies would be a really great way to start shifting the conversation. But
Yeah.
I
So
hope
I've put Clifton's CV in the chat. Unfortunately, like a lot of his barbershop work is forthcoming, but you can reach out to him. You know, you could get
yeah,
access to it anyway.
that's awesome. Thank
It's
you.
a really great paper. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
I had a question, Sophie.
Yeah, Julia.
After seeing this the second time, it's brought up new ideas for me.
Yeah.
So one of the big issues about barbershop as it relates to non-men, basically, or non-like white male voices, is that they don't just just exclude women for like no reason. And like one of the ideas that's like heavily kind of like, you know, swept under the covers, but also like everyone thought it was that women's voice inherently and like biologically can't blend the same way that men's can. And that's just like a widely held belief in barbershop, or maybe not necessarily in people today, but like over history. And so like people thought it was both like inherently not as blendy and like resonant and able of creating those overtones, but also they would then say it's not as fun to listen to because of that lack of capability. And so to me, the idea that it's a similar idea, it reminds me of sports basically, of like, oh, well, women are inherently weaker or like can't do this than men. And so we're just going to separate them instead of put them together on the same playing field. And with these ideas, both of race and also here with gender being, or really sex they're talking about, if they're going to bring it back to biology, as like these really deep rooted ideas. Do you think it's worth changing, or do you think that like I see kind of, you know, more diversity in the a cappella community, and you know that one of the ones that was Smile, that was the mixed group, they looked more like an a cappella group than a barbershop. It just happened to be 4 people. Do you like think it could be worth barbershop society, you know, staying around, or do you see the future elsewhere, or do you want to?
I think it's difficult, especially with the Barbershop Harmony Society itself being so rooted in so many problematic things. I think there probably wouldn't be anything wrong with dissolving the Barbershop Harmony Society, and forgive me to any actual massive diehard fans who think otherwise, but I think genuinely that it feels like there's so many problems with it that it might be really hard to completely overturn some of the stuff, like retraining judges and like changing the foundational principles of it, because they have a very big section on their website that talks about how the society was founded, and it was men only, and it was rich oil tycoons in Tulsa, and that's its foundation. So I think there's definitely still a virtue to it being contested separately as Barbershop Harmony, because I think there are some really big differences between a cappella performance and Barbershop Harmony. But I think that it would probably be okay to just scrap the Barbershop Harmony Society and start something new, personally. That's my take on it. But actually the mixed gender quartet that you picked up on, half and half, are actually 2 guys from one quartet and 2 girls from another, and they just perform together. And there is more of an emergence of mixed gender quartets coming out now, which is fun, and the repertoire for that is expanding. But I do think in terms of competition and the way that this society is structured, it might just be time to scrap and start again, personally.
Sophie, you mentioned money a few times. Where's the money coming from? Like,
Society
is this
membership and donors. It's
Oh.
a charity. Yeah, it's very much like society membership and donors. It doesn't generate much funding on its own. So I think that's where they've always been like reluctant to shift, is that the donors that they have at the moment are what keep the society running, and they want it a certain way. And I feel it kind of parallels a lot what we experience in classical music as well, is like, well, the donors want to hear Beethoven, so we're going to keep playing Beethoven. But yeah, that's primarily where it comes from, is membership to the society and donors.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a question for you, Sophie. Can you talk a little bit more about the Everyone in Harmony initiative, and what do you think, is being accomplished by that?
Sorry, I'm just trying to get back to my conclusion page because it disappeared. So the Everyone in Harmony initiative was something that they rolled out in 2018 alongside the inclusion of women in the society. And it's involved a lot of educational campaigns as well, where they send out members of the society into schools, and they do education workshops on performing in the barbershop style. I think it was also one of their ways to say that they were trying to address the racial inequalities that are present in the society, as they have tried to increase membership from the African American community. I don't think it's been entirely successful. We still do see predominantly white quartets performing. It's predominantly white audiences. But I think that in a way it's been successful as well. We saw that 700 women joined the society after women were allowed to compete. So I think giving people opportunities to be a part of it and to try and change the tides has been working slightly. But it's still pretty much in its infancy, and the fact that COVID happened not long after it was introduced as well, everything then moved online, and it's been very difficult to actually know whether those demographics are changing and whether those initiatives have been successful, because everything got put on pause. All the conferences have been either skipped or moved online. So it's hard to see what's changing, but I think it could be beneficial if there's actually substantial stuff behind it, rather than just oh, we're really trying hard to be inclusive kind of thing. Actions speaking louder than words, I guess.
I'm curious to know if the participation of women has had an impact, if the participation of women in Barbershop Harmony Society has had an impact on Sweet Adelines.
I actually don't know about that. As far as I'm aware, I think their enrollment actually slowed down when Harmony Incorporated started, because that was a more inclusive community that was mixed race group. So there was more inclusivity there. And I think that once Harmony Incorporated started, then there was a bit of a slowdown with the Sweet Adelines. But I'm not sure how it's been impacted since women were allowed in the Barbershop Harmony Society. That's something I should probably use for further research.
Any more questions or comments for Sophie?
So getting back to Juliet's question about like the kind of larger context of a cappella singing, are there, I mean, like it seems like in the choral world more broadly, there is a lot, I mean, not just in the a cappella world, but there is a lot more attention. Of course, I'm not deeply embedded being paid to this stuff. And so I'm just kind of curious, are there organizations that this organization could take cues from, or do you like, is there a larger context is kind of what I'm asking.
I think there is. And I actually am friends with a scholar back in Scotland, Kathleen Croney, who is she just wrote her PhD thesis in running choirs and dealing with members who are transitioning and how to help facilitate transitioning voices through choral skit singing. She also runs the LGBTQ Choir of Scotland. So she's working all the time with gender nonconforming singers who are going through transitions in their voices. And there are initiatives out there where they're working flexibly with people and their voice types and not restricting it to being an all-male quartet or an all-male ensemble or all-female. And I think there are people out there doing the work that could be consulted to advise on these things, because that's just someone I know who's done that research. I'm not as massively involved in the choral world myself either as an instrumentalist, but I think there is a shift towards understanding people and their voices and how voice type isn't indicative of gender, I guess. And I think that it's just a case of listening and elevating those voices and bringing them into the conversation to decide how we move forward with these antiquated societies.
Well, I'm loath to draw a line under this discussion. Does anybody else have anything they want to contribute? Ask? Take up the gauntlet that Juliet and Sophie have thrown down? Otherwise, thank you very much, Sophie.
Thank you, everybody, for your time.
Look forward to seeing where you take this in the future.